All right, today we're going to unwrap a fascinating legal case from over a century ago that, believe me, still raises some incredibly tricky questions. It's a story about love, betrayal, and a murder that forced the Supreme Court to draw a very, very fine line.
So, let's just dive right into the central puzzle. We've all heard the phrase crime of passion, right? But what does it actually mean in the eyes of the law? Is it possible that a moment of pure, intense emotion could ever, even partly, excuse the most final act of all? That's the big question we're tackling. And here's the case that puts it all on the table. Back in 1912, a man named Hilario Dela Cruz killed the woman he was living with. He was found guilty, which isn't a surprise. But then, when his case went all the way up to the Supreme Court, something really unexpected happened. They actually lowered his prison sentence. The big mystery is, why on earth would the highest court in the land show any kind of leniency to a confessed killer? To get our heads around their reasoning, we have to look at the very specific legal tool they used. It's a concept known in the law as passion and obfuscation. It sounds complicated, but let's break down what that really means.
Okay, so first things first, this is not an excuse that gets you off the hook completely. The law calls it an extenuating circumstance. The key part of this whole idea is that a person acts on an impulse so powerful, so overwhelming, that it literally short-circuits their rational brain. Their judgment gets clouded or obfuscated.
Probably the easiest way to think about it is like a discount on a prison sentence. The court is saying, okay, you committed the crime, but we recognize that your mental state at that exact moment was totally compromised by this huge emotional shock. But, and this is a huge but, that discount is not handed out easily. You have to earn it. To really understand when this defense does work, we first have to look at a case where the court said, nope, absolutely not. This is the precedent, the case that sets the rules of the game. It's an earlier case called U.S. versus Hicks. So, in the Hicks case, here's what happened. His ex-girlfriend left him, which the court made a point of saying she had every right to do. But Hicks didn't just snap. He actually planned the murder. He even acted all calm and polite right before he did it. The court saw this not as a moment of lost control, but as a cold, deliberate act of anger.
And you have to listen to the incredibly strong language the court used. They said his motives came from vicious, unworthy, and immoral passions. What they're basically saying is that feeling jealous or angry because someone breaks up with you, well, those are not the kind of legitimate feelings the law is willing to give you a discount for.
Okay, so that's our benchmark. Planned out anger over a breakup, not a defense. Now let's pivot back to our main event, U.S. versus Dela Cruz, and see how the facts were so critically different.
See, in this case, the story was completely different. Dela Cruz didn't sit around stewing over a breakup. No, he walked in and found his partner with another man right in the act. The court records really emphasize that this discovery was sudden. It was a total shock, and he killed her right then and there in that immediate heat of passion. This puts the court in a really tough spot, doesn't it? You've got two men, two killings. Both seem to be driven by some kind of passion tied to a relationship. So how do you give one guy a break but not the other? Where do you even begin to draw that legal line in the sand?
And that brings us right to the core of the court's whole decision. They knew they had to draw a really clear, legally sound distinction between these two violent acts. So here's how they did it. It really all boiled down to three key factors. For Hicks, the source of the passion was just anger over a breakup. For Dela Cruz, it was the sudden, shocking discovery of infidelity. The nature of that passion was also crucial. Hicks's was called immoral, but Dela Cruz's was seen as a sufficient impulse. And finally, the timing. Hicks planned his attack, while Dela Cruz's was immediate and totally impulsive.
The court was basically just doubling down on its own precedent here. They were saying, look, the law makes a distinction. It might offer some leniency for impulses that come from what it considers legitimate feelings, like the genuine shock of discovery. But it's not going to do the same for passions it sees as vicious and unworthy, like calculated revenge.
So, what did all this legal back and forth actually mean for Hilario Dela Cruz? Well, this very fine legal distinction had a very real, very measurable impact on his life.
The first court, the trial court, handed him a sentence of 14 years, 8 months, and 1 day. That was the standard penalty. No discounts applied.
But after the Supreme Court applied that passion and obfuscation rule, his sentence was knocked down to 12 years and 1 day. That legal discount shaved off more than 2.5 years from his time in prison.
But here's the thing, this was not some open and shut case that everyone agreed on. In fact, the decision wasn't even unanimous. One of the justices strongly disagreed, and that leaves us with a question that still echoes today.
Yeah, one justice, Justice Moreland, was not having it. He wrote a short but really powerful dissent, saying simply that he believed giving this guy a break was not warranted by the facts or the law. It just goes to show you how controversial and difficult this whole line-drawing exercise really was even back then. And that really leaves us with the big idea to chew on. This case from 1912 forces us to ask a really fundamental question. Where should the law draw that line between recognizing our human frailties and holding people criminally responsible for their actions? And maybe more importantly, when you look at our world today, has that line moved at all since 1912? That's definitely something to think about.